We're in this long study called Follow Me, and we're looking at the life of Jesus and what it actually means to be a disciple or an apprentice under a rabbi that we call Jesus. And in this first section of the year, we're talking about Jesus' emphasis on people. Relationship is at the center of discipleship, and if you follow Jesus around on any given day, his day would be dictated not by his to-do list, but his to-love list. He was with people all the time. And so the last few weeks we've been talking about what that means for you and me in the 21st century. Last week we talked about how conversation determines the quality of your relationships. And so when you can create healthy, meaningful dialogue with brothers and sisters in Christ, often that leads to very deep community. And I loved hearing stories this past week. Quite a few of you took up the challenge of asking some of those questions that were on the card last week. If you were not here last week, we gave out a challenge of creating some healthy conversations with other people. And I really enjoyed what several of you said about what you talked about last week. One of those questions was, what is the first song that you played over and over and over again? And what my favorite answer to that, someone told me this last week, it was the song, Stacy's mom's got it going on. You guys know that song? Maybe you don't. Anyway, that was my favorite answer to that song. I heard a lot of really good answers to that song. So that was last week. You can get online. You can go find the forum last week if you want to get in on that. Follow me, follow through, which is what we're calling them. So this week, we're delving into the reality that when you spend time with people, really good things happen, but also bad things occur. So the first time I really learned this lesson that you can be hurt by people was when I was a teenager. So I'm going to give you a glimpse into my life as a 15-year-old. Please know, before I even tell this story, the stakes are very low. This is just teenage drama. Not a lot happens in this story, but here's what occurred. I'm in the passenger seat of a car. My friend is next to me, Amanda, driving down the road. We have a mutual friend, John. John has divulged information to me, and he has told me to keep this information confidential. And me being a loyal friend, I am going to keep John's secret a secret. Amanda would like to know this information. So she looks over and says, "Hey, Phil, can you tell me what John told you?" Again, I told you this is teenage drama. So I say, "Amanda, I'm loyal to John. He said I wasn't supposed to say this, so I can't tell you this information." And so then Amanda says, "Okay, nope, no problem." Well, then a few minutes later, Amanda picks up her phone. She calls John. And she says, "Hey, John, I'm sitting here with Phil, and he's just being a great friend, and he's holding what you've told him in confidence, and he's not telling me." And that's so nice of Phil to do that. But I know that you're probably okay with him telling me this. Are you okay if Phil tells me this whatever information? And then there's a pause, and she hangs up. And she says, "Well, Phil, I just talked to John, and John said that's fine if you tell me." So I was like, all right. So then I told Amanda the information that John had told me, which, by the way, I actually don't remember what the information was. That's how silly it was. I don't even know. But I tell Amanda this, and then Amanda starts laughing maniacally. And she says, "Phil, you're so gullible. I didn't call John. I faked that phone call. Ha, 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 ha." Oh, man. I got so upset. I mean, this was my first experience of just a cold-blooded betrayal. I was so upset. So I just said, "Pull over. Let me out. Let me out." I got out of the car. To this day, I don't remember how I got home, but I did not want to be in Amanda's presence. This was the first time in my life that I learned a lesson which I have now experienced many times, which is this: to open yourself to another is to open yourself to be hurt by another. You see, love produces the greatest blessings in life, and love also produces the greatest curses in life. In fact, if you think about it, the best thing that's happened to you in the last year probably happened because of love. And the worst thing that happened to you this past year probably happened indirectly because of love. Because something bad happened to someone you loved. Or because someone you loved said something that really hurt you. So love Love is always a risk for blessing and a risk for curses. Now, sometimes we get hurt in really big ways, but more often than not, what I've learned in ministry is that the hurt, as far as relationships go, it usually happens in very subtle ways. So, for example, see if any of the following applies to you. Have you ever been in a conversation where you struggled internally with the courage to say something? Maybe you wanted to tell a story, or you wanted to make a joke, or you just wanted to say something. And so you finally got the courage and you said it to whatever group you're in, and it was completely dismissed. Like no one cared, no one listened, no one acknowledged. Maybe someone one-upped you, and you just felt, oh, nobody even noticed. Or here's another situation. Have you ever found yourself going over to someone's house or at some event, and you take it upon yourself to get there early and set up, and maybe you're staying late afterwards, and you're sweeping the floor, and you're doing the dishes, you're doing all the work so that everybody else can have a good time, and nobody acknowledges it. And so you get in your car and drive home thinking, man, does anybody even care about how much work I put in? Because no one else did the work. It was all on you. That hurts. Or maybe you have gone to great lengths to accommodate someone else's personality or preference. You've done a lot of work to make sure that this person's going to be okay, and that was not reciprocated. And so that hurts. Or how about this one? A major event happens in your life and no one asks you about it. Like it was big. And you know that this person knows that it happened, whether it was good or bad, and they don't say a word about it. It's huge. Or maybe you've missed church several weeks in a row, no one called. Even that really good friend in your Bible class, or the really good friend in your small group, and they didn't notice, no one called. That hurts. Raise your hand if any of the scenarios I've just described have applied to you at some point in your life. Raise your hand if you felt that kind of subtle hurt. It does hurt. And it gets even worse with family, by the way. When your dad doesn't follow through on a promise, when your son betrays some core family value or tradition, when your sister says something that cuts you to the heart, the family side of things is maybe even harder than the friend side of things. And so what I want to talk about today is, how do you follow Jesus when you're hurt by followers of Jesus? Because it's going to happen till the day that you die. So what do you do? If you have a Bible, we're going to look at a scene from the life of Jesus and a conversation he has with one of the disciples. And before I read that text, I do want to say, if you find yourself in an abusive relationship, whether that's physical, emotional, sexual, spiritual, that is not something that you just push under the rug. Jesus never called you to be a punching bag. So if you do find yourself in a more serious scenario like that, you need to get out of that. You need to tell someone about that. And by the way, if you're ever the recipient of that information, take that very seriously. I want you to know, as church leadership, we take very seriously people that come to us and share that kind of information with us. Luke 22. So at this point in Jesus' life, he is approaching his death. He's poured so much of his time into the 12 apostles. He's given them lesson after lesson. He's given them love, compassion, second chances, day after day after day. And so now Jesus is on the precipice of his own death, and Peter is about to betray Jesus. Peter is going to look face to face into the eyes of the Messiah, he's going to look face to face into the eyes of other people and deny that he knows the Messiah. He's so ashamed of being a disciple, at least in these three situations, that he's going to say, I don't even know the guy. I mean, this betrayal cuts to the heart. This would be like a husband in public denying that he's married to his wife because he's embarrassed by her. I mean, can you imagine how hurtful that would be to the wife? Well, this is what Peter's doing. Peter's Jesus' best friend, arguably, and he's going to tell these people that he doesn't even know Jesus. Peter's denials, they're sinful, They're hateful, they're hurtful. In fact, Peter later is so upset by his denials that he runs off and he weeps bitterly, the text says. He's a grown man, and he's sobbing because he feels so bad about these betrayals. And so that hadn't happened yet. This is the conversation before the denial. So Jesus is now looking into the eyes of Peter, knowing that Peter very soon will be too embarrassed to tell other people that he even knows Jesus. Here's what Jesus says to Peter. Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift you as wheat, but I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. And when you've turned back, strengthen your brothers. Such an amazing text here. As a side note, I do want to make a comment about prayer and the power of prayer. We sometimes question the effectiveness of prayer, but in this situation, we see Jesus employing prayer as his primary strategy to thwart the dark powers threatening the heart of his best friend. Jesus prays. Verse 33, but Peter replied, Lord, I'm ready to go to prison for you. I'm ready to go to death for you. This is typical Peter. He's courageous, he's passionate, he's valiant. And then verse 34, Jesus answers, I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows, today you will deny 3 times that you know me. Peter hurts Jesus. Jesus shows us how to conduct oneself when we are hurt. So here's 4 things to observe from this story in Jesus' life. First, Jesus cares more about the spiritual development of his offender than the actual offense. So I'm really drawn to the line where Jesus says, when you turn back, strengthen your brothers. Like he's already thinking about the ministry that's going to happen on the backside of the sin. So Jesus, notice he doesn't utter a word about how much this betrayal is going to hurt him. Jesus doesn't even say how wrong the betrayal is going to be. He just prays that Peter will be able to do great transformative ministry for the kingdom of God on the other side of the sin. That's amazing to me. Because I think when I put myself in Jesus' shoes, like what would I say to Peter? If I knew that my best friend was about to betray me, and I said something like, well, when you turn back, like when you come back around, I would say things like, when you turn back, make sure to apologize to me. Or when you turn back, make sure to make amends with me and other people that you've hurt. Or when you turn back, make sure to admit your failure. But Jesus says, I want you to strengthen the church. You see, Jesus understands that Peter's mistake does not preclude Peter from meaningful ministry. Jesus wants Peter to grow, not to grovel. And so he's concerned about the future ministry of Peter more than the offense itself. Imagine how that would change how you dealt with people if that was your primary concern, their future ministry. Here's the second thing we can observe from the story. Jesus expects some friendship failures. So if you notice, Jesus is not surprised by this, or he doesn't appear surprised in the text. So on one level, I do think Jesus calls people to a high standard, and he holds people to a high standard of living. But on the other hand, remember back to Matthew 11, I've read this text several times. When Jesus describes his own inner nature, he uses the word gentle. I'm gentle. I'm humble in heart. So even though Jesus calls us to high expectations, he realizes that because we are sinners, we will often not meet those expectations. And so he's not surprised when we sin. He doesn't like it, but he's not surprised by it. I love this line in the Gospel of John where John says this. Jesus did not need any testimony about mankind, for he knew what was in each person. Like he knows. He knows what's lurking in the heart, and so therefore he doesn't get overly upset about that. Now we, and I say me here, and then we as a church and as a culture, we've definitely flipped on this one. Most of us go out into the world expecting that everybody else is going to be on their best behavior for us. And we expect that other people are going to be servants, and that they're going to do the right thing, and that they're going to maintain the correct views. And we expect that other people are going to be humble. And I expect that other people are going to drive their car according to my needs. And the minute that they don't, or the minute that someone says something a little off or a little wrong, or you wouldn't have said it that way, what do? We freak out. How dare you? Why did you say that? How could you tweet? Why did you text that? We get so mad. The reason we're so mad is because we expect everybody to be a saint. If you expect everybody to be a saint all the time, you're going to be let down. Now, I'm not saying we don't have high expectations, but I'm just saying let's be realistic like Jesus was. People are going to make mistakes because they're human beings. So we can expect friendship failure. So here's a third observation from this encounter with Jesus and Peter. Jesus does not rant. So notice we don't read that when Jesus says, Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times. We don't read this. Peter, for crying out loud, did you attend the Last Supper or not? Peter, do you not remember I just washed your feet? Like, what are you doing? And Peter, who was it that called you out of the boat to walk on the water? That was me. And Peter, who was it that called you and just a few others to go on this mountain, and I was transfigured before you? Who gave you that special treatment? It was me. And now what are you doing? You're going and throwing our friendship away. How dare you? Now, I would have said that. You might have said that. Jesus doesn't say that. He doesn't rant. He doesn't get on his soapbox and say, how dare you? You call yourself a Christian? He just calmly says what's going to happen. Yeah, Peter, you're going to sin. And then Jesus goes and he dies for that sin. He doesn't rant. Here's a fourth thing that Jesus does. This is an implication that I'm drawing out of reflection upon the text, but I think this is true. It makes sense to me. I think Jesus prepares his heart for hurt before he's hurt. So we know that Jesus has already prayed about this situation. I have prayed for you, Peter. We already know that Jesus is looking beyond the offense to the ministry that happens on the backside of the offense. And we also know that Jesus sees Peter more than simply a mistake. He sees Peter as a person, a human being fully capable of redemption. And so because Jesus is choosing to see this wider picture, his heart is now prepared for the hurt. Now, I don't think personally that this is a foolproof method. I don't know if there's a way to prepare the heart so that we don't feel any hurt. But I do think that there's some work that we could do on this front. You could prepare your heart for hurt before you are hurt. In fact, I'd like to lead you through a short exercise to try to see what this might look like. 3 parts to this exercise. This first part involves you closing your eyes. So if you'll indulge me for like 20 seconds, if you just close your eyes. If you can call to your mind somebody that you're frustrated with. Could be someone that goes to this church, could be someone you work with, just someone you're frustrated with. I want you to imagine in your mind them doing really effective ministry. Think about their gifts and imagine them doing something great. They're teaching a kids class. They're hosting a dinner at their house. They've just given thousands of dollars to some cause. They're blessing the poor. Imagine them doing ministry. Now, part of you is thinking, they wouldn't do that. No way. But I'm just saying for the exercise, imagine that they're doing great, great ministry. Okay, open your eyes. Do you even want that to happen? Sometimes in our dark places of our hearts, we get so mad at people, we don't even want them to be effective at ministering to the world. But if you started thinking about this person that way, even though it's not realistic, like they would never do that, but if you start thinking and praying in that direction, how do you think that would change your life? Because again, what does Jesus pray for Peter, this man that's about to betray him? Jesus is praying for future ministry. And so what would this do to your heart and your life, this person that you can't stand and you're mad at? If you started praying, Lord, would you enable this person to love others? Would you enable this person to be a blessing to their circle of friends? Like if you started praying for the giftedness and the ministry of that person, can you fathom how much that would change your heart? Here's the second part of this exercise. It begins with a question. I want you to hold your hand up, so we're going to all rate this question on a scale of 1 to 5. The question is this: what do you think the chances are that this person who frustrates you is going to push your buttons again? Show me with your fingers. Okay. Everybody's just being, high five, just wave at me, yeah. Of course they're going to betray you and hurt you and irritate you because they're a human being. That's just what they are. So repeat after me here. Say, they are not Jesus. You see, we're changing our expectation level here. See, most of us, and again, including me, I tend to expect people to be fully attentive to my needs. And that's why I get irritated. That's why you get irritated. So we're going to change that a little bit. So I want you to repeat after me a few times here. Say this: I will not expect. Thank you. See, you're frustrated with me right now. That'd be a really funny question. How many of you thought of me in that exercise? I don't want to know the answer. All right, let's start this over. I will not expect this person to be fully attentive to my needs. I will expect them to be pretty consumed with their own problems. Here's the final statement. I will expect them to not place me at the center of their world. Now imagine with me, come Thursday this week, this person, by the grace of God and by your prayers, they send you a really, really encouraging text message. Can you imagine how amazed you would be by that? And how much of a blessing that would be to your week, because you're expecting them not to do that. You're expecting them to be a normal human being, and so therefore when they do something wonderful, that's not the norm, that's out of the norm. It's exceptional, it's unusual. So notice, when you change your expectations of people, you're less likely to be hurt. Third part of this exercise is really short and simple. It's simply this: imagine yourself with this person and they've done something that frustrates you, but you choose not to rant. You just take a deep breath and you let it go. So, future growth, expectation management, no ranting. So what are we doing in this exercise? What are we really doing? We're preparing our hearts. Because like you just said with your fingers, someone's going to frustrate you this week. Someone's going to push your button. They're going to say something that offends you. But if you prepare your heart beforehand, you can be like Jesus. I mean, Jesus is so not reactionary with Peter. He's loving Peter through the sin. Isn't that crazy? Like Jesus already knows it's going to happen. And he loves Peter before the sin. He loves Peter during the sin. He loves Peter after the sin because Jesus prepared his heart. Paul summarizes this posture towards people that frustrate us with one word, one sentence. Colossians 3. Paul says, say this with me, bear with each other. So in the Greek, that word bear is the word anekomai. And I looked up all the usages in the New Testament of when this word is used, and most often it's translated, this is so interesting, it's translated to put up with. So when Mark 9, Jesus is dealing with this boy, and the apostles can't cast out the demon, and Jesus says, how long will I put up with you? That's the same word. Or in 2 Corinthians 11, Paul is saying, how long are you going to put up with my foolishness? It's a rhetorical argument. It's the same word. How long will you put up with this? That's the word here in Colossians 3. Just put up with each other. So here's the truth. Maybe let this one sink in. Maybe this is your takeaway from today's sermon. It is a spiritual discipline to put up with people. It's okay to be there. There are times when we should love one another and when we should serve one another and teach and admonish one another. There's many times we should sing to one another. But there are days when we simply don't have the emotional capacity and strength to do those things. And so on those days, you can rest assured that it's okay to simply put up with somebody else. It's a spiritual discipline. Can you imagine if there was a song with put up with one another? But it's in the Bible, like I'm saying. Paul writes it. It's a spiritual discipline. So give yourself some grace. Sometimes that's all you can do. It's what Jesus did with Peter here. It's like, oh, Peter, you're going to make the biggest mistake of your life. Deep breath. I love you. You're a human being. That's okay. He's bearing with Peter. So here's an amazing quote from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a brilliant author, and he resisted Hitler during World War II, and for part of his life, he pulled about 20, 30 young men into the snowy mountains, and he built this seminary, and he just taught them how to follow Jesus. And he wrote a book about community. It's called Life Together. And the best sentence out of this book is this. Bonhoeffer says, "He who loves the dream of community more than community itself becomes a destroyer of the latter." It's an amazing quote. So here's what he means by this. For so many of us, we have fallen in love with the dream of community or the dream of relationship and friendship. And so we think to ourselves, well, I'm going to go to church, it's going to be amazing, and Stephen's going to sing the songs that I like, and Phil's sermon's going to speak to the issues that I care about, and then I'm going to go to class in my small group, and I'm going to have these 5 or 6 friends, and we are going to talk every day, we're going to pray for each other every day, we're going to hold each other accountable, we're going to have common interests, we're going to like the same movies and TV shows and sports, and we're just going to live life together, and they're going to know me so well, and we're going to be vulnerable together. It's going to be amazing. And Bonhoeffer's saying, when you fall in love with that, you destroy the church. We must love what is, not idolize what isn't. You're called to love the person next to you, and they're not ideal. They're not perfect. We're all called to love this messy organism that is called the church, full of imperfect people. It's the same principle with the marriage. When people fall in love with the dream of a perfect spouse rather than the person in front of them, they destroy their marriage. Like if you hold your partner in marriage to this unattainable level of expectation, then you will be perpetually disappointed because they're not going to meet that expectation. Healthy marriages are ones where husbands and wives love each other, not the idea or the dream of each other. They love each other, warts and all. There's a commitment that precedes preference in healthy marriages. We don't marry to fix. We marry to bless. That's the Jesus way of marriage, and it's the Jesus way of relationships. You see, we dismiss others at the drop of a hat. And when we do that, what do you think the world thinks about us? Like when we just drop someone, dismiss someone, unfriend someone, cancel someone, ignore someone, give someone the silent treatment, are sarcastic with someone when they offend us, how is that different than what all the rest of the world is doing? So much of the call of the Bible is to be set apart, to be holy, to follow the way of Jesus, which is very different than the way of the world. We're called to be set apart in our purity, yes. We're called to be set apart in our commitment to protect the life of the innocent, the life of the unborn, the life of the marginalized, the life of the poor. We're supposed to be set apart in all of those ways. However, we're also called to be set apart in how we treat the people that offend us. Are you any different than the world on this one? So years later, Peter's an old man. Maybe he's reflecting on Jesus' gentleness with him, and he writes these words at the end of his letter. This is not on the screen, but Peter says, above all, love each other deeply. And here's why: because love covers over a multitude of sins. So this week, I'll tell you what's going to happen. Someone's going to push your buttons. They're going to hurt you. They're going to get on your nerves. They're going to stir up intense anger in you. And you are a follower of Jesus. How will that identity impact your response? We are going to sing a song with some of the most amazing lines from the Bible. And if you have any kind of a need, or if you want to respond to this message in any way, you're welcome to come tell me about that while we stand and sing.